good to be with you going down the road, ladies and gentlemen. John Glover's going to join us a little bit later in the show. John is, he's head of the NDSU Foundation. To say he succeeded would be a gross understatement. I'll just throw the numbers out at you now. Their goal was $400 million. That's with an M, right? $400 million. They raised $586.7 million. And so there's a dedication to NDSU out there. And we'll visit with John about that in a little bit. But I got to know Jack Seaman not through his business. I got to know Jack Seaman through his ambition to get a message out. I don't know that he ever thought he was going to win political office as much as what he thought part of the debate needed to bring in different issues. And I respect the heck out of him for that. He ran, I don't know if you'd call it independent, libertarian, whatever. I'll let him describe that. But Jack Seaman is the owner of MinDak Gold and Silver. And he'll explain to you just what that is. Jack, good to have you coming down the road with us, bud.
Thanks for having me back on the show, Joel. Good to be with you.
You bet. Tell people what MinDak Gold and Silver is.
We're a precious metals dealer. We buy and sell gold and silver coins and bars and old U.S. coins. Anything that has to do with gold and silver, we buy and sell it.
Okay. Why? I've got a friend that ran out of safe space. He ended up buying more safes because of it. Why would you recommend to anybody gold and silver?
Well, because it's been money for 5,000 years, Joel, and it's going to be money 5,000 years from now. And over the course of history, people have always invested in gold and silver, especially in times of uncertainty or especially in times of inflation. And they feel good about having some real money, some sound money in the safe, like you were talking about. It makes you sleep good at night, kind of like having a handgun nearby makes you sleep good at night. Having a little gold in and silver in your safe is something everyone should probably consider.
So let's talk about that, because you mentioned 5,000 years. This has been the currency, the trade item. You know, in my time, in my lifetime, which has been short in relation to that, it hasn't been gold and silver. It's been coins that weren't gold and silver, made to look like they're gold and silver, but it's been paper for the most part. Why? After all these years, when I bought a house, I bought a pickup, I bought a Harley, I bought, you know what I own. Why isn't it that my paper is the currency in your mind and others?
Because the paper that you have in your pocket isn't backed by anything of value. The only thing that's backing our paper anymore is the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. Prior to that, you could have taken that paper into the bank and exchanged it for gold. And prior to 65, the half dollars, quarters, and dimes that you had jingling in your pocket as a kid, those contain 90% silver. And of course, the Constitution calls for the only legal tender to be made of gold and silver. So there really was gold and silver money right up until the time Nixon cut the head off finally in 71. And the reason he had to do that is he had a war to pay for, and you can't print money at will when you have to back it to gold. So he just cut the severs of that and printed up the money to keep the war going.
Let's talk a little bit about the gold standard. I'm not sure everybody understands just what you're getting at when you talk about the Nixon era. Walk them through that again.
I'm sorry, I had a little break up there, but
okay.
In 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, right?
Yeah,
so you
exactly.
Gold, yeah.
So tell people what the gold standard was. What we really did as a nation. Walk them through that, Jack.
Well, damn, I was going to have a prop, Joel, but I didn't think a prop would look good on TV. But let's just go back, say, 100 years. You had a $20 gold piece. It was a coin. It was 1 ounce of gold, and you had a $20 paper bill. You could walk into any bank, the Bank of Higginson, and exchange that gold coin for a $20 bill, or you could exchange the $20 bill for $20 in gold. Let's fast forward 100 years. Now, a $20 bill probably will get you lunch at Taco John's, but that 1 ounce gold coin, Joel, is worth about $2,000. So it's really maintained its purchasing power over time, and that's the allure of gold and silver as an investment.
So what type of bounce do you get in that? Because, you know, when I speak to gold and silver traders, I don't know if traders is the right word, but many of whom save that way, they've pointed out to me, these are buddies that I ride Harley with, they've pointed out to me that gold and silver bounces in value as well.
Yeah, it sure does. There's no question about that. But the one thing that it doesn't do is consistently lose money over time. the way that paper money has consistently lost money over time. And it's obviously getting worse now, Joel. We just had a year-over-year inflation number of 7.5%. What that means is, from a year ago, you've lost 7.5% of whatever cash you have laying around. It can't purchase as much as it did last year. And that's the difference between paper assets and gold. Gold might bump up and down a little bit, but it always maintains a core value. Paper money just continues to lose.
So can you find it? You know, if I walk into MinDak Gold and Silver, and I want the equivalent of a couple $1,000s worth of gold, do you have gold bars for me? Do you have physically gold for me?
Yeah, we sell the physical metal. You can walk in with cash and walk out with gold and silver in your hands. So we have a good supply of gold coins and bars on hand. We have silver coins and bars, and we have some specialty items and, you know, a lot of old stuff that, you know, people from collections over the years, and they pass away and the family brings it in and liquidates it. We have a lot of fun stuff on hand. So even if you're not interested in maybe buying something, you just want to learn something and check it out, you're welcome to come in anytime. We'd love to have you, Joel.
Okay. Well, I would when you get back from Arizona, because I don't want to go to the one here in Fargo until I get a chance to visit with you at the same time. I want to talk a little bit about that inflation. There's people claiming that it's a 40-year high. When you look at certain items, you know, I think we here in North Dakota, let's take just a look at our local economy versus what you look at, which is a global economy and, of course, the economy in the U.S. In North Dakota, I don't think I've ever seen farmers liking commodity prices like they are now. You know, the fact of the matter is wages have gone up, and they've gone up significantly. You know, we have more jobs than we have workers, so workers are in a position where they can go out and say, nope, not that one. Now, how much will you pay me if I do this one? So what I'm going to ask you is the economy in as bad of shape for the average Joe or Jane as what it's being made out to be?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think maybe North Dakota is insulated from just how bad the economy is in the rest of the country. I think it's great that people have their choice of jobs, you know, and they can almost choose their wage. And I think it's great. Commodity prices are up and farmers are making money, but fertilizer costs are up as well. And other costs go up right along with it. So you really have to compare the parallel to what we call real rates or real yield versus what the nominal rates or yield is. And so just because inflation is going up doesn't mean that, you know, even though the people are working and they're making money and they're making more money than they had before, they're also having more expenses than they've had before. And so you've got to factor that in. And I think on a national level, Joel, I think things are really not good at all. I mean, we're $30 trillion in debt. We have a $9 trillion Federal Reserve balance sheet, which is just more debt. And like you said, we had that 7.5% year-over-year inflation. That's about the highest it's been in 40 years. All of these are just facts. They're not opinion. And I'm of the opinion that this is not good for the economy. It's not good for the country. And it's going to end badly. We'll just see how it plays out.
Well, I know a lot of people agree with you, Jack. I know that. I want to talk about that a little bit, though, because I have a friend named Ken Conrad. And when Ken Conrad ran for office, the only thing he talked about was debt. He talked about how he promised after his first term, if we didn't have a balanced budget, that he would not run again. He announced he wouldn't run again. You know, in the end, Quentin Burdick passed away, and North Dakota asked him to run. He did. But then after that, under the Clinton administration, we got a balanced budget. Some might argue that that was shell game. I would argue that it certainly was better than what we looked at before. You mentioned how the national debt is climbing now. Where do I go to find a champion with that? Because the Republicans used to talk about national debt all the time. But when they were in power recently, they rang up more national debt than anybody had previously, period. So where do I go to find a champion when it comes to fighting our national debt?
Well, the first name that I thought of when you asked that question, Joel, and I'm not surprised you asked it, Justin Amash, former Michigan congressman. He was in office for 5 terms as a Republican, but everybody and their dog knows he was a libertarian to the core. Mm-hmm. I think that's where you need to find gems like that in the weeds. I don't think Justin is done with his national political aspirations. I think there's a good chance you'll see him on the libertarian ticket for president in 2024. But you're exactly right, Joel. You can't find Republicans anymore that can call themselves serious about cutting spending and being concerned about the debt. The debt went up by a gazillion dollars under Bush. It went up under Obama. It went up under Trump, and it's going up under Biden as well. So I think both of the old parties have completely, lost their names as far as fiscal conservatism goes. You can kind of throw that out the window, and I think we need to look to new individuals, whether it be independents or maybe some people from the libertarians that have always been fiscally conservative, as you know. That's where you're going to find people to champion that cause.
So that's one of the big debates that's happening right now when it comes to our overall budget is whether or not to invest more into it. I was one of those Democrats from the center position that wasn't jumping all over the Build Back Better plan, that loved the infrastructure plan. I'm not going to lie to you on that. Roads, bridges, that's how you run an economy, and you take it to a place that many people's economy isn't, is by competing and giving people a chance to use infrastructure to go ahead and then succeed in their local business. No different than what you've done. So, I'm not trying to portray myself as some bleeding heart, boy, let's just throw money at it type situation. But there are things out there that I think are going to stop a workforce from allowing it to succeed. And I don't know how you fix it, Jack. I don't. Let me give you a perfect example. Daycare. I mean, how do you fix that? If you can't fix it, you're gonna lose a huge part of your workforce. And so from a libertarian position, which I'm pretty sure you think the government or no one needs to get involved in it, how do you fix it?
Well, I don't know exactly how you'd fix something like daycare. Daycare is a problem that we need to look at along with a whole bunch of other problems, right? To say that there isn't stuff that the government can do for people that would be helpful would be, I think, nonsense. I think from a libertarian perspective, you don't want no government. You just want a small, limited government, a constitutional government that is really constrained on what it can do. And I think if you really started to unpack everything that the government has done over the last, 60, 70 years as far as growth goes, and get that out of the way and just let the free market interact and become a true free market again, I think you'd see a lot of these problems go away. And I think they'd go away a lot quicker than you would find by spending money and throwing money at the problem.
Jack, back in the 1980s when I bought my first vehicle ever, other than the one that my dad gave me, the one I paid for, the one that I signed on the dotted line, my interest rate, if I remember right, was 16% for that vehicle. Yesterday, I bought a pickup. And that pickup, the interest rate is about 2.7, if I remember right. That's a big difference. That told me a little bit that the economy isn't in as big of a trouble as what some might think it is. Or is that a false indicator, Jack?
That's a false indicator, Joel, because real rates are, the Fed still has basically a 0% federal funds rate, 0 to a quarter point. Your 2.7 rate on your truck is a great low rate, but that's about 5 percentage points below the inflation rate. The Federal Reserve is talking about raising rates to try and curtail inflation. Well, if they really want to get in front of it, Joel, they got to raise rates to above the inflation rate, which is 7.5. If they wanted to really get in front of it, they could go to 8.5, 9% interest rate. That's what they need to do to slow down inflation. But you and I both know if they tried to do that, that's going to crash the economy. It's going to pop the housing bubble. It's going to pop the stock buckle, the stock bubble. And we saw that play out in December of 2018. The last time the Fed tries to raise rates, I think they got about 0.75% that they actually raised. The stock market crashed. And in January 2019, Powell did his pivot and started lowering rates again. So the Fed is really backed into a corner. And I don't know how they're going to try and get out of it because there's no way they possibly can. I think they're kind of in deep doo-doo either way.
Jack, the debt itself, when you look at who's borrowing us money, it's China. Nobody is trying to pretend that China and the U.S. are doing the kumbaya, right? We're not best friends, but yet we're still borrowing money from them. Explain that relationship and why that you might agree with it or you might disagree with it.
Well, we import all their stuff and then we give them our dollars. And that's the way that works. We have a huge trade deficit with China. And China isn't our only debt holder. I mean, I mentioned before, the Federal Reserve right here in America has a $9 trillion balance sheet. So there's plenty of debt out there to go around. But specifically what you're seeing with China is they're holding our dollars and giving us stuff in exchange, and then using our dollars in any way they see fit, which it also could be used to do business with Russia, Iran, and any other bad actors that we don't necessarily like. So it might not be the best agreement for America, but it's just the way it is right now.
You know, I never told him when we asked him to come on that I was going to hang on to him this long, but doggone it, I'm enjoying it too much to not hang on to him. Jack Seaman, owner of MinDak Gold and Silver, and a man who's always made me think outside the box when it comes to how the economy works and how it should work. Before the break, I made him dictator. I made him the ultimate boss of the good old U.S. of A. He doesn't have to go through Congress. He doesn't have to worry about the Supreme Court. He just gets to make the decision. Fix the economy. Fix what you do with the gold standard or how we trade money. Just fix it, Jack. What would you do?
Well, first I'd audit and end the Federal Reserve, and then I'd cut 75% of the government and make it all go away, and then I'd fire myself. And that would be as simple as that.
I knew everything that was coming except fire yourself. You know, can I ask this? Who the heck's going to run it? Because somebody's still got to mow the yard, Jack. I mean, what's going on here?
Let the market run it, Joel. Let the market run it. It's all good.
Okay, the Federal Reserve needs to go away. Why? Tell people why you think it does.
Well, first of all, I want people to understand the Federal Reserve is not a branch of the U.S. government. It's no more federal than Federal Express. The Federal Reserve is a private banking cartel that was given control of the nation's money supply in 1913. And they're the ones in charge of it. And they're not part of the government, and they don't have to do anything that we want them to do. What they've done since 1913 is destroy 97% of the purchasing power of the dollars that you have in your wallet. And it continues to get worse and worse, as we're seeing now with national headlines. Our money is no longer backed by gold or silver. And so that is what is wrong with the Federal Reserve. It is destroying our money, and it's destroying our wealth, and it's greatly increasing the wealth gap in our country.
How much power do you think those banks have? I mean, how much?
They have.
Didn't we kind of back, you know, when everything hit at the end of the Bush administration and Barack Obama came in and it looked like the economy was headed to the Great Depression. And the next thing we found out was that many of the banks, the bigger banks, the Goldman Sachs of the world had been lying to us. That we were basically bailing them out and we had no choice but to. You know, explain to me what you think of those banks.
Well, I think that the banks are somewhat criminal in nature, and I think that they're definitely in this whole game for themselves, and they've been this way from the start. And they love the fact that the Federal Reserve is helping them out, and they love the fact that they can get their access to trillions of dollars in capital without any kind of backing to any sort of sound money principle. And, you know, we've been putting up with this for quite some time. I don't know how much longer we're going to be put up with it. But if we continue down the path that we're on, Joel, we're just going to see the inflation get worse, and we're just going to see the debt get worse. And what this means for people sitting around the living room watching the show is that your power to purchase things with your current income level is going to continue to go down. And that even though the economy in North Dakota is great, it's not going to keep up with inflation. And that's something everybody should be concerned with. Okay,
let's go to the other proposal you had, which is to take, I'm not going to get into the fire yourself. I'll let that one be on its own. I will say this about Jack. He doesn't want to be somebody who spends his life in elected office. So I'll back him on that 100%. I want to talk about if you cut the government by 70%, what about those individuals on Social Security, on Medicare, on Medicaid? What about what we're going through in Ukraine right now? The fact that we have to have a national defense. You can't do that and cut the government by 70%. How do you fix that?
Well, I think you could, Joel. You could keep the national defense, and that's basically what the Constitution calls for, is the government to provide a national defense along with a few other minor things. And it's not too long ago, Joel, when was this? The 40s, 50s, somewhere around there. We didn't have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, anything like that. Being robbed by the government to pay them tax money and then having them turn around and spend it on bloated programs that you don't get a say in is not charitable. What used to really work in this country is good old-fashioned charity. Local foundations, state foundations, individual charities, things like that would help people that couldn't afford their bills to get by or get medical care or things of that nature. And people laugh and say, yeah, Jack, you're hearkening back to, a time that just doesn't exist in the real world anymore. Really? Have you not been to a benefit at any time in the last couple of years? I go to benefits all the time. One, they're a lot of fun. You can have a couple of beers. You can usually buy some cool stuff and help somebody out in the process. So charity still exists, Joel, in our country, even though we're constantly getting robbed by the government for more and more of our income.
I want to use as a story, though, for a discussion on that. A guy named Chief Novotny. Okay, Chief Novotny was on the beach in Normandy. Spoke more Czech than what he did anything else. If you asked him what he was, he'd tell you he was Bohemian. Okay, so I shouldn't probably say Czech because I got the Bohemians mad at me out there. But Chief was there. He was fighting it. And when he came back, he basically turned into an alcoholic. He did. Kerosene drip furnace in the middle of a garage that had a dirt floor. My mom would darn his clothes. She would send us over with food. When he went uptown to the bar, he hardly ever paid for a beer, but there was a recognition that Chief, needed that beer, for lack of a better way of putting it. Here was a man who did everything he could for us, and yet we found ourselves in a position where Chief Novotny was living in a garage with a dirt floor. I'm not sure charity would have accomplished it. Well, in fact, I know charity didn't, when everybody set out to help him in one way or another. And so I don't know that you're right about that, Jack.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Joel, and obviously charity, maybe on its own, you're going to find some things slipping through the cracks. But even with government help, you're finding things slipping through the cracks as well. So it's kind of pick your poison. You're not going to be able to help everyone. You're not going to be able to do everything for anyone, no matter what system that you think is best. But I think government largesse and government spending and big government programs have proven that they're really not that helpful, and they're actually costing us a lot more than we think they are.